Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Good morning. We're here with Mesa County Compass on a Tuesday morning. We are here to interview Mr. Chaz Evanson, who is going by Chaz Evanson. He is going to do a run for our governorship in Colorado. Welcome, Chaz.
Thank you. It's great to have me here, for you guys to have me here. Thank
You're
you.
sure welcome.
And before we get started on the actual interrogation, if you will, would you give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you do, where your placement is, why you're running, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Colorado native. I was actually born in Durango. I was mostly raised in Cortez. I spent a lot of time around different areas on the western slope. My granddad was a ranch foreman, never owned his own cattle operation, but managed a lot of big ones. So I spent some time in Yampa. I spent some time above Blue Mesa Reservoir on Blue Mesa at Pinecrest Ranch. And I spent a significant amount of time outside of Oak Creek, where my granddad was running a quarter horse ranch.
Fun.
But I did graduate from Cortez, from Montezuma Cortez High School. So I do have a PhD.
There you go.
A plain high school diploma.
I like it.
That's better than piled higher and deeper.
But most importantly, I think I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and a husband and a father, and of course a son and a brother. As far as professionally, I spent 20 years in the United States Marine Corps. I had a different path than most people know about. I was actually towards the end of my career, actually in the early part of my career, I started out enlisted. And then I worked my way up to be an E6, which in the Marine Corps is a staff sergeant. And that's dependent on the service too, what they call it. And then after that, I applied for a program to be a specialized officer, which is a warranted officer. And so I got accepted to that program in 2008. I went to the basic school in 2009. And then I spent the duration of my career as a warrant officer. There's 5 levels of warrant officer. There's 1 through 5. And I retired as a chief warrant officer 4. And so I think that's important because it's, at the level that I was operating at would be like, and it would be a long discussion, but basically a warrant officer is a subject matter expert. I was a motor transportation officer. And so I managed transportation logistics, and I also managed maintenance operations. And so once you get to be a chief warrant officer 4, it's kind of like being the chief transportation officer for a large corporation, or even some of the jobs that you would go into would be like superintendent of the Department of Transportation for a state. So and why that's important is because managing global operations, managing troops, these different things, resource management, and stuff like that. A lot of people ask me if I've been deployed. Of my deployed time, I spent a year in Iraq from 2005 to 2006, almost continuously. I only was out of country for 10 days. And then I spent almost 10 months in like East Africa, in CENTCOM, UCOM, those kinds of different areas. In Iraq, that was part of I mean, it's all part of the global war on terror, but it was specifically for that country, and we were, fighting conventional and unconventional forces. And that second deployment was kind of like what's happening right now. It was a lot of anti-piracy, was a lot of humanitarian disaster relief, non-combatant evacuation operations, and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's for my as far as my military career. I guess I spent a lot of time overseas. So 3 years in Okinawa, a year on mainland Japan, a year in Iraq, and then 10 months there. Spent some time in Thailand, but I think that also goes to just understanding, globally, how the United States compares with other nations. And it really gives me a different level of appreciation for the United States because, a lot of people throw shade or they hate the United States, but they really have nothing to compare it to. So as a young man, it was good for me to experience those other cultures, good for me to experience those other countries and their governments and how they don't work.
Right.
And how it's, a lot of tribal warfare. It's a lot of authoritarianism, and it's, reflecting on those experiences as a young man has been very crucial to my development, even as a combat leader. Or, I worked a lot with the Department of State, with the embassies and stuff like that on my last deployment. So, I mean, I just gained a level of appreciation that, I think it was, instrumental in my development. Currently, I'm fully retired, and just trying to redeem some of that time. I guess if you added up the time in 20 years, I probably about 10 or a little more years I spent away from my family. And so it's just been a great blessing from the Lord to be able to, grow the relationship with my family, with my wife, with my son, and with my daughter. Being able to reconnect with the community because, when you're engaged at that level in the Marine Corps, it's all in, defense of the nation, national security, there's no time for slack. But for me personally too, just my own personal development, I've had time to just grow personally, and learn about the things that can make a person a good husband, a good father, a dutiful citizen,
a good leader.
And a good leader.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Besides experience. Well, one of the things that you mentioned that I think is real significant that we're seeing in Colorado and the United States is kind of we're becoming tribalistic in how we interact with others. And I don't know if you see that and how it develops and what do we do about that?
Yeah. So that's a great question, and I appreciate that because I do see that. When I was in 05 was a big time in the Iraq war, and the reason why that was is because the United States came in and they decided what they were going to do is they were going to help Iraq have a constitution similar to ours, and they were going to have an election. But what they didn't recognize is, number one, a Republican form of government can't operate on the type of worldview that they have. And so, we spent a lot of time trying to educate people, and it got to the point where when we first went into Iraq, it was the Sunni tribe that was in power. And so the United States went in there and basically unseated the Sunni tribe. And about the time that I came there, we completely took them out of power, and the Shia tribe was like, oh, well, we'll treat everybody fairly. And so what we did is basically put them in charge, and I watched it unfold with my eyes. There's the Shias were no different. As soon as they got in power, they started attacking people, and really you got to think about Iraq as a combination of three tribes. It's Sunnis, Shias, and Kurds. And the Kurds, to me, so I just, in my mind, I'm envisioning like you have Democrats and you have Republicans, and then you have unaffiliated people. The unaffiliated people are kind of like the Kurdish people who are just, we're kind of caught in the middle of this tribal warfare. But I do see that, and it bothers me, because with my faith, I see the way that we should be engaging people, as we should, in the book of Ephesians, it says we should be speaking truth with love, and I feel like because the division is so deep that we can no longer have respectful conversations. In the short time I've been doing this, um, and I've chosen intentionally to be unaffiliated for that reason,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to choose a side.
You want to be a Kurd? No.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just, it's not that I'm neutral, because I'm not. I know where I stand, but number one, I want to be a good representative of the Lord Jesus Christ. And number two, I can't find anywhere in the Constitution, in the preamble, it says we the people. It doesn't say we the liberals, we the conservatives, we the Democrats, we the Republicans, and everything, and I brought my book in here because I can never remember, but it has gotten to the point where I feel like it's so tribal, but one of the things that was impressed upon my heart was when um, George Washington, in his farewell address, he was talking about these things, and he says right here, it says, I have already intimated to you the danger of parties in the state, with the particular reference to the founding of them on geographical discriminations. Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. This spirit, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature, having its root in the strongest passions of the human mind. It exists under different shapes in all governments, more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed, but in those of the most popular form, it is seen in the greatest rankness, and is truly their worst enemy. The alternate dominion of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek scrutiny and repose in the absolute power of an individual, which we see all those things happening right now. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. And I see that happening. It's never about how can we make life better for the people. It's about how can I get my party in power. So, and we're stuck in the middle of this tug of war, and it really was never supposed to be like that. I feel like we've gotten to the point where we can no longer respectfully disagree with each other. And I mean, we see
you can say the words, but
right,
we don't
right
actually do that.
Right. And I think we've seen it play out. I mean, everybody can see it. I mean, you see what was going, or probably still happening in Los Angeles. We saw what happened, when after the George Floyd stuff and all of these different things. And now we're a nation so divided. And I think about even scripturally where Paul's talking to the Corinthians, and he's talking about sectarianism, and he's like, some of you say you're of Cephas, some of you say you're of this, some of you say you're of Paul, but you're all of Jesus. You need to have one mind, you need to be unified. And granted, we're not all going to agree, but we can agree to have respectful discussions. But what's happening is it's become exactly like it is in Iraq. It's become exactly like it is in other countries where people are inciting violence against other people, and it actually solves no problems. It just makes the situation worse.
So, where do you feel like you can lead Colorado into this?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the first step is being a good representative of Jesus Christ, right? Is being willing and able to engage people. And that's what I actually really love about the Mesa County Compass. You have people of competing worldviews in here, and you bring them in and you have discussions, and you're able to do so civilly. And, you can say, well, I disagree with that point, and that's liberty, right? That's liberty. And that's what we need is, we don't need a governor who is a representative of one party or another. We need a governor who, number one, his worldview is founded on truth and not relativity, because if it's founded on relativity and not objective truth, it's hard to trust that that person's always going to stay on that path. Like I think about the Mesa County Compass, it looks like the North Star. That's intentional. You're always in this. You can always know that I'm going to measure every decision by the truth of the word and the Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Ordinance, and the Constitution.
Mhm.
Right? And the decisions that I have to make and the things that I have to say, people aren't always going to agree with, but we can do it civilly. You know, the idea that I don't even like the word debate. I would rather have the word discussion.
Mhm.
You know, I would rather have a
Exactly.
discussion than a debate, because people get emotional and they get angry. And I just, I want to be able to hear the voices of all the people. And I think how I can do that is the same way Jesus did, which is leading by example, which is meeting people where they're at, which is speaking truth and love, and that's what's missing is, we're not doing that in this nation anymore. And the leaders are allowing it to perpetuate itself. They're intentionally dividing the nation. And it hurts my heart, because for 20 years I was in the fray. I got butt friends with missing legs. I buried one of my master sergeants. I've held the guts in people. Like, you don't forget the smell of burning flesh and diesel and all these things. And this is, when you swear an oath to the Constitution, and it's like, what are the other people doing? Are they defending the freedom? Are they doing the things? And it's not an admonition, but it's just truth with love. We have to be able to go into those areas and defend truth respectfully, and
Then you would get into the trenches.
I will get into the trenches. I will speak the truth no matter what it costs me. And I truly believe, like Matthew chapter 5 is one of my favorite chapters, where it says, and it does say, it starts out, Jesus says, what is it to you that you love someone who would love you back? Even the sinners and the tax collectors do that.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but I say unto you that you should love your enemies, that you should pray for your enemies, that you should bless your enemies, that you should do good to your enemies. And then he literally goes on to say, be perfect, even as my Father in heaven is perfect. And so the measure of perfection is how well we love other people. And if I have to respectfully disagree with them, then that's fine. But I think we need leaders who are willing to engage, because a governor isn't just a governor of one group of people. A governor is a governor over the entire group of people.
And I've seen on Facebook that many people that are of a liberal bent are afraid of your run, because they say he wants to create a theocracy and he wants to put his views over, and only 19% or whatever they said are actually Christians. So
Right.
How can a Christian represent all of the people who are non-Christians, and will he?
And do it fairly.
Yes.
Right. So I think first I would say that people have a misunderstanding of what a theocracy is. And so this is the speaking truth and love part, right? Is a theocracy is a government that's ran by priests. And so, but the reality is every single person in government has a worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And so how could I represent those people is the same way Jesus represents everybody, right? He represents everybody no matter what. It's just in his way, what he does is, he offers them something, and they can reject it. I think people's fear isn't necessarily that I'm a Christian. Their fear is that I'm going to force them I'm going to try and weaponize the government against them. And that's really the fear, right? And so we have to understand the three different types of government in the Bible. First, there's the family government, and then there's the civil government, and then there's the church government. And it is even like Jesus, when he goes, he offers somebody, right? The salvation is a free gift that's offered to everybody, and I realize that not everybody believes in the substitutionary atonement of Jesus Christ. I realize that a lot of people are never going to come to that, though I would always exhort them, right? But it's also by example of coming to them in love and, showing them that it was never Jesus's way to force people. He always offered it to them. And then here's the offer, take it or leave it, and history shows us the danger in governments trying to force religion onto people, right? We have Constantine. Constantine was a Roman emperor. Before Constantine, it was a pagan religion, the multiple gods. We have Paul going up onto Mars Hill. I see you have many gods. You say, well, all those to the God of the one true gods. He's like, oh, let me tell you about this God. He offered them, but he never forced.
Free will.
Free will, and then Constantine came in and he was a believer. And what he did is he used the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not how it should go.
Oh.
Right. And the church, the papist church before the Reformation was burning people at the stake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They were going into countries and they were trying to force them. There's a lot of, there's a really good book, and I'm trying to think of the name of it right now. But it's written by a Dominican friar, and it's called In Defense of the Indians. And he talks about all these things. But I have to be able to rightly divide, just like Paul tells Timothy. I think it's in 2 Timothy where he says you have to be able to rightly divide the word of truth. And so there's areas that I do not believe the government has any business being part of.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But the fact and the reality is that our nation and our Republican form of government is founded on the truths of the scripture. Deuteronomy chapter 1, where Moses is reiterating what his father-in-law Jethro told him, because Moses was trying to
Mm-hmm.
manage this whole nation of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And he's tired,
Mm-hmm.
and the Holy Spirit, the Theopneustos, the breath of God coming through Jethro says, hey, Moses, go out and appoint leaders for the thousands, the hundreds, and the tens. Appoint judges, right? But what you see in Deuteronomy, it's very clearly laid out. It's those people are going to go elect them. Moses is not a priest. Moses is basically like the president over the whole thing. And then you have representatives. These ideas that are in our declaration or in the Constitution are clear in there. Elect judges, right? And so there are limitations. And so I would, just like the founders, I don't believe Thomas Jefferson knew the Lord in a saving way based on all of the things that he's written. I do believe he's not a deist in the sense that some people believe, where he just did.
God started stuff and walked off.
Right. He was very directly involved. But the natural law, right? And that's why the Declaration of Independence is so crucial, because of nature and of nature's God, which is a Lockean principle, which also you can find in the writings of Samuel Rutherford and Lex Rex. And then you find it here in Romans chapter 1. It's the natural law. People know, but then, it's not up. And that's what the founders didn't want. The founders broke away from that. But they also knew that if man, the humanistic, the materialistic, humanistic, and relative worldview, the Constitution couldn't stand on that. It needs a firm foundation. And so that's exactly what the word is. It's a firm foundation. And so, I could go into detail about the things that I don't think the state should be involved in. But at the end of the day, I've been in enough countries to see, Sharia law in action.
Mm-hmm.
I would never do that. Jesus would never ask me to do that. I would be sinning against God
Mm-hmm.
by forcing that on other people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I would also say that life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, God is the fountainhead of liberty. Where the Spirit of God is, there's liberty.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a solid foundation for it to rest on.
Well, I see Ruth has a
Oh,
whole page.
the whole page is,
Yes.
I got 2 pages full of
Two
stuff.
pages, 2 pages.
I won't have time to do it all
No,
today,
it's
and maybe
okay.
we'll have to have you back on later on.
Yeah.
But I just kind of wanted to touch base on a few things that being a governor is a part of, if you will, and one of it is economy and jobs. What is your plan to reverse Colorado's declining economic performance and income growth?
That's a great question. I believe that, so let me start like this, right? I said I'm a husband and I'm a father, right? And by my worldview, and even though my wife, we always work together, I'm ultimately responsible for the financial success of my family, right? And I know how much I make. I'm a retired Marine, and I'm not working outside of that. So I'm on a fixed income. And so my job is to work within the parameters of what I have, right? And it's so simple. I think it's one of those things that we in our humanness, we overcomplicate it. So number one is just the same thing I do with my family. We have to be able to separate what are the needs and what are the wants,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we have to be able to determine what those needs are. And then we have to say, okay, we have to have so much in the general fund in order for emergencies and all these other things. And then we can say, okay, what are the things that we want? And people are like, that's too simple. And I'm like, it's not. We need roads, we need electricity, we need clean water, we need self-defense, we need, the things are real simple. It's not that complicated. We just complicate it with a 298-page budget that I've read over and over again trying to understand, and I can't make heads or tails of it. And I think that's intentional. They convolute it, and all the stuff's mixed up. So I think number one is simplifying the way that we manage the budget in Colorado, the same way that I do with my family. And it's easy. Here's the parameters. But, having experience inside the Marine Corps, the government does not incentivize people to be good fiduciaries of the taxpayers' money.
Right.
So, for example, I'm a Chief Warrant Officer 4. I'm working for a 2-star general. I have multiple regiments and battalions that I'm responsible for. I have a certain budget, say it's $15 million, that I have to train and equip all these Marines to defend the United States. And I'm like, okay, I get all my leaders together. I'm like, okay, what do we need? These are the things we need. It costs this much. Okay, we got, I don't know, $3.5 million left or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I say, okay, what do you want? But then, we kind of scrutinize the wants. Like, I don't think the taxpayers really want to be buying every single Marine a Gerber to have in their pocket. You can go store by that.
Yeah.
And so separating those things out. And some wants are good. Like, hey, sir, I'm tired of lifting a 650-pound wheel off this truck. Can we get these lifts? I'm like, okay, can we use them in a deployed environment? Do we just use them in garrison? How does it benefit us? Are these, what is the long-term cost, maintenance, training, like all these different things, right? And so we say, okay, after we clear the dust, we get rid of the dross off the top after we send it through the refiner's fire. I say, okay, I got 1.5 million left. And my commander's like, Chaz, I need you to spend that 1.5 million.
Or
Otherwise,
we won't get it.
We're not going to get it back. We'll have a different budget. And I'm like, sir, I literally don't care. I'm not going out and buying Gerbers, broom handles, and extra toilet paper for emergencies, because this is the taxpayers' money. We need to be good fiduciaries. But what happens is they just send it to another person who's willing to spend the taxpayers' money. And so part of it is, I think we need to have a good understanding of needs and wants. Part of it is we need to fix systematic problems. And into those systematic problems, some of the things that are killing us is the little special projects like the wolf reintroduction. That project needs to stop. We need to stop funding all of these people who are non-citizens. We need to stop funding their education. We need to stop funding all of their, we're putting people who are not citizens of the United States over the citizens. And that's not to say that we don't love other people, but it's also unjust, right? Because Troy and Lindsay and I got an opportunity to go to a naturalization ceremony, and some of those people worked hard for 14 years because they wanted to share in the blessings of liberty here in the United States. And it's completely unjust to look at those people and say, you know what, all your effort doesn't matter. You came and did the right things, but it doesn't matter because now I'm going to incentivize these people to be here. And so having Colorado basically as a sanctuary state funding all these people, and I would say I do have compassion, you know, and just personally, I've been homeless 4 times as a child growing up, you know, but people came beside my parents. Yeah, my parents got help from the government sometimes, but it was never a handout, it was a hand up. And that's the other systematic problem is we're in the business of democratic socialism instead of how it says in second Thessalonians chapter 3, where, you know, if you're willing and able to work, you should work or you shouldn't eat. And that sounds bad, but sometimes you need to get on rock bottom in order to get better. And so I think, you know, the combination of a few simple things, and it probably won't resolve every single problem, but fundamentally, I think if we're operating within the scope of the revenue that we collect from taxes, we should never be in a deficit. I don't think the government should be able to take credit out. If you can't do it with what you got, then you need to go back and figure out what you have, and you need to start cutting the fat.
Sounds good. What's your next question over there, Missy?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so now then we'll kind of take a big jump and we'll say, which one do we want? Which one do we want? We have so many. What steps will you take to help small business and reduce burdensome state mandates?
Oh, that is a great question. So I'm a firm believer in limited government, and I'm a firm believer in maximum self-government. And what does that mean is the problem that we're having. Can you read the question one more time? Because I feel like I'm off track.
What steps will you take to help small businesses and reduce burdensome state mandates?
Right. What's happening is over-regulation, right? There's the state getting involved. And you know what? They say, well, we do these things because we need to keep people safe. And we do these things because we need to do this. But really, all of those, you know, licenses and approvals and all these things are just a way for the state to tax people. And what we need to do is deregulate as much of it as we possibly can, you know, and let the people make their own decisions, let them grow their businesses without the government involved. What's really happening isn't that the government really cares about what happens to their business. They care that they're making sure they're getting every last penny that they can squeeze from it, which is horrible for the economy. Colorado, I was doing some research. And don't quote me on this year, I'll have to go back, but probably 15 years ago, used to be in the top 5 least regulated states, and we had a booming economy. If you look at it now, we're in the top 5 most regulated states. And from what my research shows me is, and keep in mind, you know, this is just at the state level and, you know, so, you know, from the federal and what federal laws affect the state laws, county laws, city laws, about 165,000 laws that we have to wake up and abide by every day.
That's a little impossible.
Yeah,
it's impossible. And so the thing is that stuff, just the state is way too involved. The state needs to back off. You know, I do appreciate, like, I would disband so many of the 3-letter agencies. I mean, if I could, like right now, you know, I would make it so that they either didn't exist or they had minimal involvement. In other words, we still need to help. You're not there to tell them what to do. You're there to come alongside. Like if a school district is struggling because they have a population, some of the counties are small. They got like 1,000 people, you know, and they still need to educate their kids. And yeah, so they're doing the work. We're not giving them a handout. We're giving them a hand up. We need to come alongside them. That's what we should be doing. The government shouldn't be dictating. It should be coming alongside the communities and saying, okay, this is where we can help you. And I know there's that maxim, like, don't ever trust the government. It's like,
when they come knocking, say we're here to help.
Yeah, right. But, beyond that, I think that will, I mean, I see all the things going on in the community with building codes and regulations and all of that. It's not to keep me safe from fire. Like, I need to build an extra room in my house, and I'm really struggling personally with it because I just want to build it.
Mm-hmm.
But the government says, well, you need a permit.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure you're safe. Well, I want to put a toilet in. Why do you care if I have an extra toilet?
You
Well,
have to
because
go through all of these safety regulations in order to put that toilet in.
Right.
Crazy.
And it has nothing to do with safety.
Nope.
It's because they want to see that I have an extra bedroom so they can jack up my property taxes another however much, and they can continue to extort me. And so that's the problem that businesses are having the same problem. They're being extorted by the government, and they can no longer. My mom owns a small business, and she works 6 days a week. My mom works her fingers to the bone. She is one of the most awesome, best. The whole community just loves her, but she can barely survive because she doesn't make enough money to pay for all. Why should employers have to pay for an employee's vacation? I struggle with that. Why should they have to pay for all of these different things? And small businesses can't thrive. My mom's always, barely making it because there are too many taxes, there are too many regulations, and businesses they can't thrive in a heavily regulated environment. So for me, deregulating is the key to business success and economic growth in Colorado. And again, why would you, for example, who is it? Not White Castle. There's a burger joint in California. In-N-Out. They're moving from California to Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're literally, and people in Colorado are doing the same things. Think about all the guns. I've been talking to all the gun owners. They're like, we're leaving. We're taking our business somewhere else. We can't live here. And the same thing's happening to Colorado. If I'm a person from another state, I'm not going to move my headquarters to Colorado where I'm going to have to give up 40% of my revenue, and then I'm going to be at the will and mercy of the government, which we know does not care about my personal freedom. And so if you can deregulate that, it over time, and it can't be fixed in 4 years, right? It takes years.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have good tax rates, if you're deregulated, if entrepreneurs want to start businesses, or people want to move their headquarters here, they're moving to Texas, they're moving to Tennessee. Why? Because the government isn't telling them what to do. And so we need that same model here in Colorado. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, it would take some time to get that all taken care of, but at least if you'd have all the basics in place, it could naturally flow that way.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to put the practical in place. You are one man. You're the governor.
Right.
We waved our magic wand, which you wouldn't want. We've given you the providence of God to make you governor, but you still have a legislature and a court system to deal with. How much impact do you think that you can make as governor toward your vision?
Yep, that is a great question, and I really appreciate it. So I think, so one of the things, the way my mind works, I'm very analytical.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When I learn how a combustion engine works, I have to see it in my mind. Right? I see the cycle of operations. Mm-hmm. But also, so that gets to the next point of, like, I'm a root cause analysis type of person. This past year, the reason why I've been studying through Locke, Montesquieu, Blackstone, Rutherford, Jay, Kent, Tocqueville. I mean, I couldn't take enough in, because here's the thing, and that's a great question, is, how do we solve all these problems? Well, if I have a problem with you guys have a beautiful lawn out here. You guys is like so well manicured. What if a dandelion pops up in that thing? What do? You just pop
dig
the
it
head
out.
Right. You don't pop the head off, because what happens?
It's still produces.
Still there.
You have 2, and then you have 10, and then next thing you have Russian thistles, and then your whole yard is full of weeds like mine. But the point is that my assessment of the problem is that Colorado is a democracy and not a republic. And so I think what we have to do is address the root cause of the problem. You know, there's all these good ideas. I have all these good ideas. Like we can do this and we can do that. But what we have to do is we have to return the power back to the people. That's how we solve the problem. We have to pop it out by the root. If you think about Colorado and you think about, what is it? Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution guarantees every state a Republican form of government. There's no mechanisms in place. And I have the Colorado Constitution right here in front of me, and somebody can prove me wrong, but there is no mechanism in place to protect the minority from the majority. And so before we can even get to solving these problems, we have to rebalance the power. All the power has been centralized into the legislator. And so if you have the legislator, which is Article 1 of the Constitution, you have the executive, which is Article 3, and you have the judicial, or the executive, which is Article 2, and you have the judicial, which is Article 3. If you had concentrics, if you had a Venn diagram, they would be overlapping a little bit, but what's happened is they're all on top of each other. And so what I'm going to do as a governor is, like I said, is how can I lead by example, you know, leading by love, but also the governor is the one that signs all these bills into law. The governor is the one that has executive authority. And so when the legislator puts a bill out, what I'm going to do is I got 10 days to look at it and say if I agree or disagree. But I'm going to involve all of the boards of county commissioners, all 64 of them. And I'll say, you got 5 days to tell me if you agree or disagree with this law. And so that's a Republican form of government, right? And so
the majority would rule?
No, the majority. So that's what's already happening in Colorado, okay, right? If you think about it. So each person in the House of Representatives is elected by the popular vote.
Right.
Each person in the Senate is elected by the popular vote. Each person in the executive is elected by the popular vote. And so who has more people?
Well,
Denver.
Yeah, well, of course.
Right.
Because the population base
right,
is there.
Right. And so what we're living under is democratic tyranny. Right. And so what is the major complaint of all of the rural communities right now? We have no voice.
Oh, they're unheard.
We have no voice. And why is that? Because Colorado is not a republic. Colorado is a democracy. And so if you look at the federal constitution, there are 3 pillars, one of which does not exist anymore, which is Article 1, Section 4, which is the way we used to elect senators, which was 2 per, so that the House of Representatives was always the democratic mechanism, was the direct representation of the people, and the Senate was meant to represent the states. And each got equal representation by having 2 senators. Right? But we've changed that to the popular vote, which is dangerous because now what we have is a big House of Representatives and a small House of Representatives. But at the federal government, we're fortunate because Article 5, which is, well, I would say Article 2, which is the Electoral College, which had an amendment. And I think it's I'll say it's the 11th Amendment, but we have the Electoral College. So all the presidents all the states get equal representation in electing who the executive is. We don't have that in Colorado. Your attorney general, secretary of state, your governor, lieutenant governor, all popularly elected. Hence democracy, not republic. And then Article 5 of the Constitution is a ratification system. So if there needs to be a constitutional change, the legislator can't just change the Constitution. There are a couple different ways, but the way it normally happens is the representatives say, hey, we want to change the Constitution. It gets agreed upon by the houses and the executive, and it has to be ratified by a super majority of the states, which is 65%. So in Colorado, me as governor, if a constitutional change, like really any constitutional change they want to make, it will have to be ratified by 65% of the boards. And that's on my own recognizance. They can't tell me how to make my own decisions. Right. And that's how I'm going to make my decisions. Why? Because I want people to see how that can work. But here's the thing is what we don't want to do. I know there's other good candidates. I'm not blind.
Mm-hmm.
There's great candidates out there and they have good ideas and they care as much as I do. But if we don't fix the problem, which is Colorado is a democracy, it doesn't matter. It's going to be like the same thing that happens to us with the president. Just like it says in George Washington's farewell address, we're going to be vesting all of our power into one man, and we're going to go this way, and then the next guy's going to get power, and we're going to go this way. You know, all the bases got their names changed under Joe Biden. Trump just changed all of them back.
Right.
If we think that
the next election isn't going to leave everything the way it was,
right? And so I'm tired of that. You know, I'm tired of that. And so part of that problem is because the foundation of a Republican form of government is crumbling. What we need in Colorado is we need an electoral college. We need a ratification system. And the other thing that we need is to change the way we elect our senators, because there's 35 senators currently, and they all have districts. Gerrymandering is a real thing.
It is.
And so it's killing us. And so, and these are things that the governor can't change, right? But we need a governor who's willing to stand in the gap and then leave it up to the people, just like Jesus does. Look, if you want real change, we have to tear out the root of democracy and plant the root of Republican government. Anybody who's read through the Federalist Papers will recognize it immediately. It's bad. Democracy always leads to governmental self-murder. And so,
well, you could see it with the Greeks,
right?
Pure democracy.
So what needs to happen is each county needs to have a senator. That would be 64 senators. It would be double what we have, but that would give each county equal representation, right? And I also believe that the 17th Amendment needs to be repealed and we need to go back. So now think of it like this. If each Board of County Commissioners elected a senator, right? So now 64, equal representation. They work in the Senate. We repeal the 17th Amendment, and now those two senators are elected by the legislator. Then the minority voice all the way down to the county level gets represented at the federal level, right? But then it also forces moderate legislation, right? Because yes, I don't believe that the minority has the right to tell the majority
to the majority,
right? But that's the checks and balances. They would have to come to the table with moderate legislation. And people say, well, how do you measure? Well, how do you know that it was that it really affected things that much? I'll say, well, I can see what's happening in Colorado, where the state can tell me that they can come into it's child abuse for me to tell my children that there's only two genders, right? That's a violation of my First Amendment right and my God-given natural right as a parent to raise my children according to conscience. That's how I know a Republican form of government does not exist in Colorado, because that can happen and nobody can do anything about it, right? But the other measure is from the time the Constitution was ratified until 1913, there were 1,500 executive orders issued by presidents. From 1913 until today, which is about half the time, 15,000 have been issued, right? And while I can't change those things, I can stand in the gap. And you know what the people can do is a great law in Colorado. It's called a ballot measure. For 4 years, you have a chance. 4 years, you have a chance. Because you're right, the governor, I would be violating my own conscience if I came in there and said, you're going to do this or that. You know, I can't change the Constitution. It's the will of the people. And if the will of the people is to right the ship so that our children and our children's children can experience the blessings of liberty, that's what has to happen. Because all the good ideas don't matter. This is what's going on right now. Everybody's like, oh, it feels so great. And then the next guy's going to get in there, and it's going to feel terrible. And so I believe we need to, even at the federal level and then at the state, which I'll bring it full circle. I'm sorry I talked too much. I'm really excited to be here. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution guarantees us a Republican form of government. So there's a constitutional guarantee, which we are not having right now, which technically is a violation of the Constitution.
Well, and part of it comes from education, because you don't see the Constitution being taught and analyzed and thought through at all the way through school, as much as you can, because you would think that that would be important. And I remember that because that was my major too, was political science, that when de Tocqueville came through America, he said, everything in America is great until the majority makes up their mind, and then the minority has no voice. I mean, he saw that even back then, just because that's people.
Right.
That's and you have to look at it, analyze it, and say what is best for everybody, not just what's best for me.
Right.
And what do I think?
Right.
Ruth,
So,
anything?
speaking of schools, let's go with would you expand school of choice options, such as charter schools and educational savings account, that kind of thing?
Complete deregulation. The state, I think there is a need. The state so Colorado was not founded by the Northwest Ordinance. It's Louisiana Purchase and a couple other things. But if you look in United States Code, if you go to the website, there are 3 main legal documents that every single law in the United States should be promulgated from, right? And it specifically says the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Northwest Ordinance. And in the Northwest Ordinance, in order for a state to become a state, they had to have a plan to have education. But if you look at the purpose of the education, was to teach people about the Bible. They needed to be able to read. It wasn't so they could know science better. It's so they could know the objective truth. But again, I will refuse to force that on people,
right.
But I do think that parents should have the option, right? They have a natural right as a person who maybe doesn't believe in Jesus, but me, I have a right I'm under the authority of a king, and he has given me the duty and responsibility of not raising my children to be like me, but to raise my children to be like him and to be dutiful citizens and to love their Lord and to love their king. And so I don't believe the government has any business beyond providing what's necessary for reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? And science, if we're going to teach science, that's a whole nother question, right? Because there's 2 worldviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I believe that the school has an obligation to teach both creation and evolution. I think they have an obligation, and we were talking about this earlier, where kids are not given the opportunity. I was raised my whole life to believe a certain worldview, thinking, oh man, I'm a free thinker. Only to find out years later that I drank the Kool-Aid. And when I had the opportunity, and here's the thing, people are afraid, because you know what? Creation science makes more sense than evolution, right? There has never been a time in the entire creation where something went from the non-living to the living. It just doesn't happen, right? There's no evidence. There's no, the missing link. There's missing link is missing because it doesn't exist, right? But again, it's not teaching about the atoning work of Jesus. It's teaching about creation from a scientific standpoint. All 4 laws of thermodynamics, the 0th, the first, second, and third, entropy, all these different things. But yes, I believe that the government this is how much I think it should be on the parents, is I don't believe that the government even has any authority to ask me where my child is, because then that presupposes that the child is not mine, but it belongs to the government. Why do you care? This is my child. God gave me this child. And if my child fails at life, that's on me, right? That is my responsibility, is my duty as a parent. And I believe everyone, for the most part, right, the government needs to be involved where there's abuse, and people will find out, and we need to go in there and we need to take care of that, because we also have an obligation to give a voice to those who have no voice. We have an obligation to protect children, to protect those who can't protect themselves. And so, yeah, like complete deregulation. It's not even a tax credit. It just, all of that needs to go back down to the counties. The counties can manage their education how they see fit, and parents shouldn't. It's not even a tax credit. Like, don't even charge them. At the end of the day, that's how I feel about education, is it needs to be completely deregulated.
Do you have anything else?
I don't really. I think we've touched on many of these
Yeah.
points already. So I don't have anything further. Do
Okay.
you?
How about you? Do you have anything that we didn't ask you or address that you think would be important for someone to know in making a decision as to whether to support you, and how can they support you if they want to?
I would say, you know, I think the most important thing is recognizing that we have a constitutional problem in Colorado, as far as Colorado being a democracy and not a republic. It's one step forward, two steps back. And so I would just exhort people to explore that more fully on their own and see if I'm just blowing smoke. Like, just look at it, examine it, because we're never going to get better as long as democracy is the form of government that we're living under. I mean, you can see the founders. You can go and look through the Federalist Papers and see that, it is a frightful despotism. And then I would also ask, and I can work with anybody. And I know there's, Colorado has an interesting political demographic where there's, about 25 or 26% are Democrats, another 23, 24% are Republicans. And then I'm doing public math here. This isn't going to add up. So don't get a calculator.
Okay. Okay.
About 43% are unaffiliated. And I think, and based on, it's because people are disenfranchised. And it goes back to, do people really have a choice? I'm an unaffiliated person. I've been unaffiliated my whole life. And when we had that conversation about tribalism, George Washington warned us against it. But it's not in the Constitution, but we've stood it up. The mechanisms are in place. People don't even get a choice. I can choose between the extreme left or I can choose between the extreme right, and there's no room currently for a person in the middle. And so what I would ask is, I would ask people to consider George Washington's warning. I mean, he's the father of the nation. He was there from beginning to end. He was the person in the Revolutionary War. He got called back to be the president. I mean, it would seem to me a travesty to just completely blow that off. And so I guess my next thing to say is I would ask that people would consider who is the best candidate for the governorship of Colorado, not which party is the best party.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like he says, and we can see it, our representatives are literally divided down the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
And what does President Lincoln say? What does Jesus say?
House divided against itself cannot stand.
Cannot stand.
Mm-hmm.
And we are there, friends. And I'm providing a third option. If somebody else is willing to step up, that would be great. But it's not because I can't work with Republicans or I can't work with Democrats. It's because I don't believe in the two-party system. I don't believe in tribalism. And then the thing that you can help me out with is, because this is a grassroots movement, I'm intentionally not accepting any money from any businesses, any political groups. I will only accept donations from individual people because it's we the people. If the people want me to be their governor, then they will help me be their governor and they will call me forward. So obviously, and again, good stewardship. I had somebody tell me, well, if you can't raise $20 million in 10 days, then you're just not going to make it, and it's like,
okay.
yeah. And the thing is, the Lord, just like Gideon, his 300 against the Midianites, I'm here. I'm not going away. And I believe that I am a good candidate to represent Colorado, to represent the people of Colorado, not an individual party, but to be able to be the person that can bridge the gap, that can help heal the divide. And that's really where I'm at, because, I got a few years of life left, Lord willing, maybe 30, 40 years, but my children have to live here. Their children's children have to live here. And I don't want them living the life that I experienced for a year in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Good point. So what if they want to talk to you more about what you are doing? How would they reach you?
I have, you can go to my website and I have my contact information on there. I'm also on Facebook.
So your website is?
My website is www.chazevanson.com, and you can reach me there. And my phone number and email and all that's on there too.
Okay. Okay. Well, you've been watching Mesa County Compass. This is the facts as we know them, the truth as we see it. You decide. Thank you, Chaz.
Chaz.
It was very interesting.
Thank you so much, ladies, for having me on.
Yeah,
It's been a
absolutely.
great blessing.